On this exciting episode, Wheel of Fortune, turn, turn, turn. Tell us the lesson that we should learn. Lloyd Farrell's a Fink, Charlie Nichols probably hands out wooden nickels, and Hamilton Berger still can't win a case. It's Perry Mason, Season 4, Episode 15, The Case of the Fickle Fortune. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Finally, we head to the water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each time we visit the law library, we discuss a legal conundrum from Perry's case that helps us set future courtroom precedents. In this visit to the law library, we check out the always fast-paced world of probate court. In this episode, a huge amount of greenbacks get found on a man everyone thinks is poor. But you can't just take those greenbacks down to the A&P, can ya? Explain it to us, Ralph Duncan.
The money goes through probate court, and then the Treasury Department redeems the old bills with new currency to pay the heirs.
Ah. Well, from what I can find, it's a little more complicated on the probate side, a little less complicated on the greenback side. Someone dies, someone files a petition with the probate court. You get the executor or administrator of the will to take an inventory of all the deceased's property, including money, real estate, stocks, other assets. You got to give it fair market value and then pay debts and taxes. Then the executor or administrator prepares a final account, and only then can you close the estate. Good luck with all that going fast. And California has a reputation for its probate process being particularly complex and time-consuming. As for the greenbacks themselves, U.S. banks typically accept U.S. paper currency, including historical notes, for deposit or exchange. In theory, especially after 1875, 1879, all those greenbacks are valid and should be acceptable. If some banks are unfamiliar with older designs or less common forms of currency, you can go to the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, or the Federal Reserve Bank. More about that in our Pulse section. Wink. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Fickle Fortune. As our episode opens, Mrs. Hollister knocks on the door of the recently deceased Mrs. Bowden and encounters the genial, bland face of Vaughn Taylor. She doesn't get what she wants.
Well, I know you people are making an inventory, and I was wondering about a vase I was always very fond of.
Everything here will be taken to the county warehouse as soon as I finish my investigation.
Well, yes, of course, but
That's where everything goes in a case like this, where somebody dies and there's no will, no heirs.
Well, I thought I could be of some help.
No, thank you, Mrs. Hollister. I'm sorry.
My expectations were thwarted. Perry Mason, Vaughn Taylor, denying an old woman entrance to a house, and then coming in and promptly finding Mondo Cashola taped beneath the drawer of a dresser. Ka-ching. Vaughn Taylor, this guy's got to be a bad guy, right? He was the first murderer in the series. The Case of the Restless Redhead. Admittedly, he was a stuttering bishop and a decedent in the case of the stuttering bishop, but he's going to be our defendant? Congrats to you, Gail Patrick Jackson, shifting things up a little. You know, it feels like there's typecasting in Perry Mason world, not Von Taylor. I think he's our first actor who meets the trifecta category. That is, he's been a defendant, a murderer, and a decedent. If you can think of others, let me know. Well, Ralph Duncan doesn't seem like he's on the up and up initially. But another reason why I was suspicious of him is that name. You know who else was named Ralph Duncan, don't you? The schnook-neck lawyer from the case of the sleepwalker's niece. Another red herring. Anywho, when Ralph gets home to his wife and cousin and wants to show him the greenbacks, they're gone.
You remember those old greenbacks, darling? Currency the government called in years ago? I guess big amounts like this wouldn't be honored now except under special circumstances. But I wanted you to see it before I had to hand it over to the county.
Ralph, you know you're not supposed to bring things home. You could get in trouble.
Oh, I just wanted to show you what it looks like.
Well?
It's gone.
In our next scene, we discover it's cousin Charlie Nichols who's done his cousin Ralph wrong.
Mr. Farrell, that's just kidding, ain't it? I mean, greenbacks are still real dough.
Technically, I suppose so.
Charlie's in league with a Lloyd Farrell, and Lloyd Farrell seems like a good candidate for getting dead real quick. Enter Norma Brooks, a young woman bewitched by Mr. Farrell's ample charms. They've had a prior relationship, but it's been a year, and now Lloyd's back. Be careful, Norma!
I know, Norma. I know how long it's been.
1 year.
2 Gibsons, please.
Yes, sir.
One with the double onion.
Surely, sir.
That you remembered.
I remember a lot more than that. You, still work for the county?
Yes, why?
Oh, I don't know. Something reminded me of it. Rather unusual business opportunity I happened to run into.
I thought perhaps when the phone rang this time.
Norma, I wanted to see you. I called you because I can call you now, because I have the right to. Because I finally got my divorce.
I'm sorry, Lloyd.
Ralph Duncan sees in the paper that Josiah Ames died, but left behind some lean, mean green. And guess what he decides to do? Go see Perry. Good idea.
Now, if this is part of the money you found, someone has played a very neat trick. They fixed it so you can't prove your story. Can't even prove the money's the same.
But I've got to. I've got to tell the truth even if I lose my job.
Paul gets the deets from a nurse at the Josiah Ames charity home.
Then the old gentleman never mentioned his money.
This is a charity place, Mr. Drake.
Miss Hamilton, who actually found the greenbacks?
I did. Clear in the bottom of his footlocker. First there was an old sweater, then a newspaper, then several big pictures of his wife. She's been dead a long time.
Then Perry pays a visit to Albert Keller, the recipient of Josiah Ames's will.
Ames opened a little repair shop over on 8th Street. I used to drop in and help him with his books, what little there was of them. Sometimes we played chess.
Did Mr. Ames ever mention to you that he'd made out a will, one in your favor?
Oh, he did say several times that he was grateful that I dropped in on him, and that someday he'd prove it.
Didn't you take him seriously?
Would you have, Mr. Mason, under those circumstances?
It could be that the Ames greenbacks and the Mrs. Bowden greenbacks that Duncan found are 2 separate stashes. Not likely in Perryland, though. Duncan gets a call to come out to the Bowden joint and finds Lloyd dead. Guess how Duncan knows Lloyd? That's squirrely cousin Charlie, and Charlie leads Perry to Norma. Perry plays prognosticator and gives Paul the report that Paul worked so hard to obtain to give Perry.
I don't know what Mr. Farrell's business was.
Import and export. And from what I can find out, he was doing very well at it. There is, however, a rumor to the effect that Farrell may have been dabbling in a profitable sideline.
Disposing stolen goods?
How'd you know?
I didn't. But if it's true, it would account for a few enemies who might have wished him dead.
Check.
What about his friends, intimate friends?
Well, if you mean the ladies, Farrell had his share. Here, I got a list.
Norma Brooks on it?
Perry, why do I go to all the trouble of digging?
Paul, you're doing fine.
And in court, Hamilton's back.
The prosecution certainly intends to prove, Your Honor, that there was a lot more money in the Bowden house.
Thanks to some sleuthing work, Perry strikes gold with a game of Guess the Conspirator.
Miss Hamilton, have you ever been someone's last hope?
What for?
Here are photographs of 6 different people. Have you ever seen any one of them before?
This one.
In court, Perry unearths the collaboration between Charlie and Lloyd, and he also gets Norma to admit she was the one who planted the cash on Josiah Ames. Hamilton Berger gives Perry a backhanded compliment.
Mr. Mason is not only out of order in pursuing the details of this lesser crime, it seems to me he's doing his own client a disservice. He's just introduced testimony here to prove that it was Duncan indeed who took the money from the Bowden home. And he's raised the monetary value of the motivation which surely drove this defendant to commit the murder from $5,000 all the way to $153,000. The prosecution is most grateful to Mr. Mason for this assistance. But I think this line of interrogation has gone quite far enough.
Then, with Albert Keller on the stand, the house of cards begins to collapse. Our murderer?
Your Honor, it would seem unlikely that the woman who must have used that telephone on the night of the murder to call the defendant a few moments after 6 was someone Mr. Duncan knew personally, or he surely would have recognized her voice. Who else would have frantically called Duncan to come to the scene of a murder that she herself had just committed? Come and be caught for her crime.
That money was mine. I found it first.
Back in Perry's office, Hamilton pays a visit and reveals all that lean, mean green is going to the state. We end with a killer line for Paul, Hamilton, and Perry in that order.
And as a conscientious taxpayer, I guess I should be glad about that.
As a salaried public employee, I am glad.
We're all glad, Hamilton.
That last line had to be written as a subtle metadrama for the audience to know that Raymond Burr was on Bill Tallman's side. Welcome back, Bill. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul involves greenbacks and their prevalence. Paul throws out this fact rather casually.
Right at the present time, according to the best authorities, there are still a great number of greenbacks that have never been turned in for redemption. In fact, more than 1/3 of $1 billion worth.
So our Paul prompt, is this truth or fiction? When I tried to do some initial research for our law library visit to figure out whether greenbacks could be redeemed now or not, I couldn't find anything definitive. Is Paul's factoid about greenback prevalence accurate? If it was true, is the amount of outstanding greenbacks less or the same as it was in 1961? Tell us what you find. Our Della for this episode concerns Kathy O'Donnell, a.k.a. Norma Brooks.
Lloyd Farrell wasn't always very nice. I knew that. But I'd never known anyone like him.
Here's 10 about Norma. Number 1, born Ann Steely in Alabama. Her father was a school teacher and owned a local movie theater. The family moved to Greensboro, Alabama when she was 7, then to Oklahoma City when she was 12. She got the acting bug at age 14 after seeing A Star is Born. Number 2, after high school, she worked in a U.S. Army induction center as a stenographer. She left that job to study acting at Oklahoma City University, saved money for a 2-week trip to Hollywood, and took off hoping to begin a movie career. Number 3, listen to this. She goes to Hollywood. An agent of Samuel Goldwyn spots her at a drugstore. Although the screen test revealed a thick Southern accent, read country, Goldwyn was impressed with her appearance, put her under contract, and she cut her teeth at the, wait for it, you know it, Pasadena Playhouse in a dramatization of Little Women. Number 4, she changes her name from Anne to Kathy after a female protagonist in Wuthering Heights. And then she changes her name to O'Donnell at the recommendation of Samuel Goldwyn's wife, who claimed audiences love actors with Irish last names. Number 5, she makes her screen debut in Wonder Man, 1945. Her first major film role, 1946's The Best Years of Our Lives. We'll talk about why that film was important a bit later. She's playing Wilma Cameron, the high school sweetheart of Navy veteran Homer Parrish. Homer, of course, played by real-life World War II veteran and double amputee Harold Russell.
You wrote me that when you got home, you and I were going to be married. If you wrote that once, you wrote it 100 times. Isn't that true?
Yes, but things are different now.
Number 6, other big roles for Kathy. They Live by Night, 1948. Farley Granger is her love interest.
I'd like to have me a filling station. A garage along with it, maybe.
It'd be too slow for you. You want to live your life fast.
The film made the Guardian's list of top 10 noir films, and the two actors appeared together again in Side Street. Samuel Goldwyn loved that pair. He was big in Farley Granger's career. Number 7, she was the love interest of Jimmy Stewart in the Western The Man from Laramie, and her final film role came in 1959, playing the part of the sister of Judah Ben-Hur. Number 8, TV, of course, in the 1960s. She's on Perry Mason, The Rebel, and Man Without a Gun. Her final screen appearance, 1964, in an episode of Bonanza. Number 9, while she was on the set of The Best Years of Our Lives, she met the director of that film, William Wyler's older brother, Robert Wyler, and married him at age 24, despite the fact that Robert Wyler was 47. Number 10, on April 11th, 1970, her 22nd wedding anniversary, Kathy O'Donnell died after a long battle with cancer. Our Perry for this episode concerns this exchange with Trag. It's something I think I paid more attention to in season 1. I would love to make a small montage of these great Mason-Trag exchanges.
What's going on? Well, I'm surprised you have to ask that, Perry. Usually you know before I do.
Perry asks a question. Trag gives a response about Perry. Classic. The theme of this episode? It's got to be fickleness, right? We start with our decedent, the very fickle Lloyd Farrell. Cheating Norma, Charlie, Albert, anyone else who dares to stop his grand plan of flying to Tokyo. Also fickle, familial loyalty in Charlie, that chump. In the end, it's fickle fortune that rules the day. All that money, it doesn't go to Lloyd, it doesn't go to Ralph, it doesn't go to Charlie or Norma or anybody. It goes to the state. And if it helps pay Hamilton Berger's salary, well, we know what that's worth. Now it's time for a Perry proverb. Perry certainly knows how to give a compliment. We've already mentioned his gesture of goodwill to Hamilton at the end of the episode. Well, in this exchange with Trag, Perry lays down another proverb. Note, he's a little more definitive in his praise here.
Oh, good evening, Lieutenant.
Action, Unit 3, come in.
I suppose you're going to tell me you have a client here.
You're always very perceptive, Lieutenant.
This dynamic between Perry and Trag, much clearer in the novels in my opinion, but the television show has it too. Perry's real wit matcher is Trag, not Hamilton. Berger may be Perry's friend, But I think it's only because Perry's so convinced Burger's not a threat. Trag, he's always very perceptive, and you heard it from this episode's Perry Proverb. Now, let's grab a sip from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Each episode in the water cooler, I give you deleted scenes, outtakes from the script that didn't make the episode's final cut. We have 3 of them. Number 1, the camera just keeps rolling as Ralph Duncan inventories the rest of Mrs. Bowden's home. There are grocery receipts, a collection of socks without mates, Lawrence Welk LPs, and a pinup of Abraham Lincoln. Number 2, we see Lloyd's day planner. Entries include 8 a.m., call supplier in Japan, pretend to know Japanese. 10 a.m., meeting with bank manager, flirt shamelessly, borrow money. 12 p.m., lunch date with Norma, take her to fancy place, then leave without paying. 2 p.m., sneak into business meeting, make grand entrance with sunglasses on. And then 4 p.m., finish up the day by mislabeling some imported shipments just for fun. That scallywag. Number 3, finally, Hamilton gets notice that he won't receive a pay bump as he almost put the wrong man on death row for the 110th time. Our Paul prompt from last episode involved sports car rallies.
An all-night sports car rally. Is that some kind of a small car race?
Recall that Deborah Bradford was in one at the time of the crime in the case of the Resolute Reformer. We asked, did they really exist? My dad was on the case. He writes, quote, "While I could not find any direct 1960s references to the race type featured in the Resolute Reformer, I did find some pertinent information. 1, such races are called regularity races. 2, in regularity races, it is not important to be the fastest, but the most precise. 3, during a regularity race, set times are communicated to the driver and navigator to complete the various sections of the route. Number 4, participants are required to cover the different sections of the route at predetermined times. Number 5, the route is marked in a road book given to all crews. Number 6, for the entire duration of the race, the cars must be driven at the indicated average speed, usually 50 kilometers per hour. And number 7, the lengths of the races are quite variable between 800 and 300 kilometers in total, sometimes divided over different and consecutive days. Depending on the vehicles, the regularity races are divided into classic, with cars in original trim on public roads, and sport, with cars in sport trim on closed roads. Thanks, Paul. Now, let's hear a listener letter. Got a nice email this week from longtime listener April. She and her sister Dee have been making a Perry Mason fan podcast since the beginning of the year. You might want to check it out. It's called TCOT, a Perry Mason podcast. The two of them rehash an episode in detail, far more detail than I give you here. They've been tackling the episodes that fancy them, and with 26 episodes under their belt at the time of this recording, they've already gone deep on the case of the deadly verdict and the case of the final fade out. April wrote me this week, quote, "The podcast is going very well. My sister and I are really enjoying talking about Perry Mason and spending some time together. I am really enjoying your podcast. I love the unique view that you bring to each episode, and I'm also amazed you can carry it off so well by yourself. Keep up the good work, and thank your father and your aunt for the extra input. I really enjoy them." And my response is, you keep up the good work, April, and I really enjoy hearing from Aunt Mai and Dad too. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? Drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. In our next episode, Loring Lamont gets his wolf on. You know what that spells? Death. Or in the alliterative world of Perry Mason, getting waylaid. It's the case of the waylaid wolf. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!